hello and welcome everybody to the Urban Journalism Academy. We are very sorry for the delay, but I feel now we have also a bit more audience, so it was worth it to wait for 15 minutes. We are not sure if we have to leave the room at 10:15. Maybe we'll find out during the session, and maybe depending on your time, we could kind of, I don't know, go until 10:30 if that's possible in terms of the room. I think we just introduce ourselves first. My name is Tobias Kettner. I'm a communications officer at UN Habitat. It's a headquarters in Nairobi in Kenya. And I'm working mainly in our online communication and now at the moment in the run-up to the Habitat 3 conference on general press and media issues.
Hi, I'm Timur Antonio. I'm an Italian journalist and I work for the Italian Association of Municipalities, but I'm also a contributor for many journals in Italy and magazines like Sole 24 Ore or the Italian edition of Wired. And at a global level, I write about urban issues for Cityscope and for other media.
Okay, in the preparation of that session, we decided to split it basically in two parts. The first part will be sort of a fast introduction into the current process of urbanization, facts and figures. So that's kind of a very basic, but we felt very necessary introduction, what is currently going on in terms of urbanization. And then the second part, Simone will take over, and maybe you want to say something?
Yeah, the second part will be more on the global debate on urban journalism. So what is urban journalism and how we can apply this category to the European Union level and in the process of Habitat 3.
Okay, as we are so few people, maybe also during the presentation, if you have a question, just raise your hand and we can make it a bit more interactive. I'll start with some facts and figures on urbanization. Basically, as we're sitting here, 100 years ago, only 20% of the people worldwide lived in urban settlements. 20. In the less industrialized countries 100 years ago, that was only 5% of the population that lived in cities or towns. It's an incredible fast process, as you can see on that slide. In the year 2000 and in the year 2000 or 1990 we had 43% of the people living in urban settings and 57 in rural settings. 2008, that figure for the first time in the world's history changed. Like in 2008, for the first time in history, there were more people living in towns and cities than in the rural countryside. And the prediction is actually that by 2050, 2/3 of humanity will live in cities and towns. So if you look at these figures, it shows that there is an incredible fast process that completely changed the way of our life, basically. If you look at the regional disparities, we can see that Latin America is already by far the most urbanized continent in the world. Like we have in North America, we have more than 80% people living in cities and towns, but also in Latin America, 79% of the people live already now in cities and towns. So Latin America had its kind of peak, a very fast urbanization process from 1960 to 2000. And now it's kind of having already kind of a well-established urban society and a stable urban growth pattern. I'm focusing mainly now on Africa, Asia, and Latin America, but just referring to Europe, Europe has 72% urbanization currently. Asia and Africa are probably at the moment the most interesting and most challenging parts of the world when it comes to urbanization. The African growth is by far the fastest, while the Asian growth is by far the biggest. So if you look at Africa, we can see Africa has an annual growth rate of 3.5% per year, and this growth rate is expected to stay until 2050. So the rate of urbanization in Africa is incredible, fast. On the other hand, in Asia, we have a very diverse pattern. We have already very well urbanized countries, which are also the most industrialized countries, like New Zealand, Australia, and Japan. We still have very rural settings, if I think on, for example, Nepal or Sri Lanka. And we have countries that are currently urbanizing in a very, very fast speed. That's mainly China and some other kind of fast developing economies. And Asia has the most emerging mega cities. So it's kind of Asia is in terms of sheer numbers, it's really, really big. How is this growth happening at the moment? Unfortunately, this fast urban growth or this fast urbanization process is happening in most places in a very unproductive, spontaneous way. Like what happens very often is people are occupying land without any urban rules and regulations, without any design, any rule or right. And yeah, unfortunately, the product of that is very often very unproductive. And many of the city's problems are deriving from this kind of very unplanned way of settling. On this two sketches that are a bit small now, but we can see two kind of typical patterns how cities grow at the moment. It's either people come to a city, but they settle in kind of small groups. That's what we call the metastatic growth. And that leads to a massive urban sprawl, like a huge amount of landscapes that is used. And what is also a very typical growth pattern is that people settle along already existing infrastructures. Like a city had a certain infrastructure, people come to the city, and then they use this old infrastructure and settle around it. And what happens is that then that leads to a massive congestion because the infrastructure was just built for a certain amount of people. And now if more and more people are coming, the infrastructure just can't bear with that amount of people anymore. Very typical for countries in the developing world is that we have kind of productive centers, and then slums kind of form around these productive centers because that's basically where the people who live in slums find employment, so they need to be close to their employer. So spontaneous urban growth is creating a massive challenge in terms of urbanization. Another massive challenge, or probably the biggest challenge, is the increase of inequality. In general terms, with the exception of Latin America, income disparities all over the world are now bigger than one generation ago. And that has the consequence that slums increase continuously. If you look at these statistics, we can see that every fourth person living in a city worldwide is a slum dweller. If you go to Africa, it's every second person living in an African city is a slum dweller. If you go to Asia, it's every third person living in a slum is a slum dweller. And in Latin America, it's every fourth person. And at the moment, the number of slum dwellers hits almost 1 billion people worldwide. It's just a very impressive figure. So inequality is one major change. Climate change, resilience of cities is currently one of the biggest challenges for cities as well. We can observe that the effects of urbanization and climate change are converging in very kind of dangerous ways. On one hand, we can see that cities consume 78% of the world's energy, and they produce more than 60% of all carbon dioxide. So cities are kind of consume a lot of energy, and they produce a lot of emissions. On the other hand, cities are very vulnerable to climate change. Like especially if you look at many cities that are close to coastal areas, and if we look at cities, the most affected by the risk of climate change are the urban poor. Because the urban poor, the slums, they tend to settle along riversides, they tend to settle along hill slopes. So they tend to settle in areas that are prone to kind of or that are affected the worst in case of natural disasters. And one very big challenge that you might not feel here in Europe, because in Europe we rather have the other problem. But the youth bulge in the so-called developing world is immense. I want to give you one example of Nairobi, where I live. The average age of a citizen in Nairobi is 18 years, 18. It's the average age. And another figure that a friend who works in the university sector in Nairobi told me was that in the past academic year, like 2014, 2015, they had 40% more inscriptions in state universities than in the previous academic year. If you think about European universities that struggle, if there's like 3% more inscriptions. So there is a massive youth bulge. There's a massive young population that is kind of now joining the job market. In the developing world, the youth unemployment is up to 6 times higher than the adult unemployment. And also another figure from Nairobi, only 10% of those who graduate at universities find a kind of a proper employment afterwards. So the youth bulge in cities creates a massive risk in terms of demoralization of a whole generation. It creates a massive risk in terms of crime rates, because of course a lot of these young people then turn into crime, of political and religious extremism. So the youth bulge is not felt here, but it's felt very strongly in cities in the developing world. However, that sounded very apocalyptic, but we can still see, like, those are challenges that cities are facing at the moment. That does not mean that this is not prone to change or that it's impossible to change. We can rather see that the two premises of urbanization currently are changing a lot. Like in the past, urbanization has always been seen as a problem. Sort of the narrative was always countries are developing economically, and in this process of industrialization, people move to the city because that's part of the economic process, and then somehow the country has to deal with that problem. People live in the city. And this narrative is currently changing a lot. Like what we want to strengthen is people or cities are not a problem, urbanization is not a problem, but it's rather a powerful tool for development. Like if you look at the figures, cities occupy only 2% of the land worldwide, but they produce 70% of the GDP worldwide. So cities do offer a lot of economic opportunities for many people. And that's the reason why people move there. The second is the quality and the quantity of the urban output is highly correlated to the quality and the characteristics of urbanization. That means if urbanization is planned properly, if urbanization is done in a coherent way, then it can produce a highly quality kind of way of development. And just to highlight that quickly, how is kind of a city planned properly? I don't want to go into planning models because we don't have the time for it now, but we have identified sort of 3 main pillars that are necessary for proper urbanization. And the first one is proper urban rules and regulations. Like if you don't have proper urban rules and regulations, what many countries do not have, or many countries have very sophisticated urban rules and regulations copied from the West, but they do not have the power or the force or the human resources to implement them. So in this case, the authority is completely lost because the rules are there, but they're not implemented. So you need proper rules and regulations, which are kind of the framework of the whole process of regulation. Second is you need proper urban planning and design. If a city understands that it's growing, which most cities, at least in the developing world, are, we are talking about so-called planned city extensions. So cities do see, or should foresee how many people are coming and then plan the extension of the city properly instead of letting this growth just happen spontaneously, what we just talked about. And the third point is, of course, cities need money, but they can also generate money. So if you're running a city, if you're extending a city, you need to have a coherent financial strategy that is linked to the other 2 pillars, and that is especially linked to the planned extension, because you need to know how you generate your income. If you know how to generate your income in the future, you can also know how to kind of produce your outputs. Those are the 3 main pillars of kind of a proper done urbanization. That was the first part of my presentation. Thanks a lot for that first part. It's just a quick overview. I'm having a, okay. As we're here and we have, I'm just trying to hear, great. As we're meeting here, I would like to take that opportunity to also talk quickly about the Habitat 3 conference in Quito next year, because all that what I was just talking about, like the process of urbanization, how is urbanization done properly, this will be discussed in Quito next year. Like we have the privilege, every 20 years, the United Nations is organizing a big worldwide conference on the state of urbanization. And the next of these conferences will be the Habitat 3 conference in Quito, taking place from the 17th to the 20th of October next year. Habitat 3 will be the first global summit, the first global UN summit after the adoption of the Sustainable Development Agenda this year, and probably, hopefully, also after the climate change agreement at the COP in Paris in December this year. So it's going to be sort of the first UN global summit. Just briefly looking at the Habitat conferences. The first Habitat conference took place in 1976 in Vancouver. And at this time, the world was only urbanized by 37.9%. But what happened was that the kind of humanity, the governments, for the first time recognized the need for shelter, the need for addressing urbanization as a global issue. I think that was the main outcome of Habitat 1. You could see, or the governments recognized there is a massive process going on, and we have to tackle this issue globally. In Istanbul, Habitat 2, 1996, the urbanization was already kind of further going on. 45.1% of the world was urbanized by then. And kind of the remarkable part of Habitat 2 was that local authorities, civil society organizations were for the first time recognized as an important partner. Like Habitat 2 was a very kind of integrative meeting. And for the first time, issues were discussed, like a mayor, for example. Take a mayor of Mexico or of Cairo. Those are cities with more than 20 million people. So they basically govern more people than the president and the head of a state, of many states. So the role of local authorities was kind of a major debate at the Habitat 2 process, and the acknowledgement of the role of local authorities. Now, if you look at Habitat 3, the main objective of the Habitat 3 conference is to secure a renewed political commitment for sustainable urban development, to assess the accomplishments of the Habitat 2 agenda from 1996 to date, and to address poverty and to identify and address new emerging challenges, basically the challenges we are just talking about. Habitat 3 will produce an outcome document. This outcome document will be the new urban agenda. So you'll hear us lobbying a lot in the in the next months and basically in the next year on a new urban agenda. And key issues to be discussed in that outcome document. It's not ready yet, but key issues are urbanization as an endogenous source of development, new urban models that are required to effectively address the challenges of climate change, something I just talked about, and urbanization as a tool for social integration and equity. And here, just referring again to the number, we have almost 1 billion slum dwellers worldwide as kind of the most significant number in terms of slum dwellers, in terms of equity. The process of Habitat 3, we just discussed that on the way here. It's kind of a very complicated but very global, inclusive, and participatory process. And actually, the Urban Journalism Academy, us gathering here, is also part of that run up to Habitat 3. we try, or the whole Habitat 3 process is designed to integrate as many people, as many different stakeholders as possible. I don't want to go into detail, but we have sort of one unit and one stream that is producing knowledge. So we are basically taking stock currently on the process of urbanization worldwide. Part of that stock taking is national reports that national governments are producing. So they're producing national reports on their implementation of the Habitat 2 agenda from Istanbul and on their state of urbanization. We have regional reports that are produced by region and deal with the same issue, and we have a global report that deals with the same issue. We create policy documents. We have 10 policy units that are dealing with certain aspects of urbanization, and those policy units are really working sort of on the content for the Habitat 3 conference. So the conference will be in 2016, but we're already now in the middle of the preparation and on the preparation of the content, like to give the conference a proper substance. And those policy units produce issue papers on different topics. Like, I don't want to mention all, but inclusive cities, migration and refugees in urban areas, safer cities, urban culture and heritage, and many more. We had last week a workshop in New York at the UN headquarters on these issue papers, and you can see the first drafts on the UN Habitat website. If you go to unhabitat.org/habitat3, you will be able to download all 22 issue papers on different topics of urbanization, and they're basically taking stock on what is happening. Like, it's kind of a high-level expertise. We have, on a government level, different regional and thematic meetings. Now, as we are in Europe, I highly want to promote the meeting in Czech Republic that will take place in March next year, 18th to 20th of March in Prague, Czech Republic next year. And that's going to be one of the big sort of government-driven processes towards Habitat 3. We just talked about a government-driven process. So that's one part, but we also have a non-governmental driven process towards Habitat 3. Like, we have many different stakeholders, and we do have national urban forums that gather basically civil society working in cities, urban groups that gather the most diverse urban stakeholders, all groups that have to do something with urbanization, and prepare their agenda, their input for the Habitat 3 conference. We do have national and local campaigns towards Habitat 3. And basically part of this awareness-raising campaigns is also the conduction of many urban journalism academies. So we're currently planning urban journalism academies worldwide, and you'll soon find them on unhabitat.org website, all the different dates. So again, the Habitat 3 process is a very kind of complex process with different layers. We do have government institutions working for it, but we also have a big amount of non-governmental stakeholders working for it, and we have a lot of platforms for those groups. And this will all kind of find its way into the Habitat 3 output document. You will see a lot of tweets with the hashtag Habitat3 New Urban Agenda. If you go to habitat3.org, habitat and 3 with a number.org, you will currently still be directed to unhabitat.org, but you'll have all the information on UNHabitat's website. One thing I forgot to mention, the Habitat 3 conference is a UN worldwide conference. It's like UNHabitat is the main UN program driving it, but it's a UN conference that is kind of taking decisions that will then be implemented in national law. So it's kind of a very big, important milestone for the urbanization and for the urban community that happens next year. I hope to see many of you in the run-up to Habitat 3. And if there are questions, maybe we do a first round of questions. Otherwise, I'll hand over to Simone.
Sorry, I had to step out for a moment. So maybe you mentioned
problem.
this, and I missed it. Is the preparation of Habitat 3 in any way linked to the post-2015 agenda? Obviously, you're a bit, your time schedule isn't completely aligned. If yes, how are you part of defining the SDGs in the run-up to the September event in New York?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, of course we are. I mean, UN programs are not lobbying for their own urban SDG, because we didn't want to have that sort of competition. But of course, we are if we will have an urban SDG, this will kind of put more importance on the whole Habitat 3 process. So the two processes are very strongly interlinked, and Habitat 3 preparation is part of the urban SDG preparation. We all hope very much for an urban SDG. If that happens, then we get more importance for Habitat 3. Okay, if there are not more questions, Simone, shall we swap?
Yep.
Yeah.
So thanks, Tobias. As you said, Habitat 3 is the first time that the role of media is officially recognized in the process. Media are officially considered as stakeholders for this process, and it's really important that we are trying to make it part of a specific major group that's going to start its activities in the upcoming months. From Medellin to Caserta to Nairobi and to other places that we are covering with the meetings that Tobias said before, we're trying to start dialogue among us, but also with journalists, colleagues, on what is urban journalism. So what is urban journalism today, and what are the main challenges of urban journalism? We can start to give a definition of urban journalism. It's a journalism by the city. So it's a journalism starting from the people, starting from urban sources, and covering topics that interest people living in urban areas, which are the great part of people in Europe and in the world. But it's also journalism on the city. It's journalism focusing on problems, challenges, and how to overcome that in the future. We can also say that it's a journalism for the cities, civic journalism. It's a type of journalism that is decisive to focus on some topics, to try to find some answers, and to foster the urban debate at local level. Also, it's a factor for the local democracy process. It's a journalism in the city, because it's a journalism starting from the ground, so reporting from what's happening in the cities, in the communities, and not only at institutional level. So it's urban reporting is a decisive element of urban journalism. But we can also say that urban journalism is journalism with city, because it's a concept that it reminds together the concept of collaboration, of engagement, of links with the communities. And in some cases, as you know, media are part of the communities as driving actors for change. And we can't forget that in the future it will be an increasing role, not only through the direct role of media, but also with involvement of people in the social media process and in the local democracy process. But what we need to understand right now is why cities are the big news, why cities are the topic, the main topic right now, because cities are the places where all the challenges take place, both on the negative and the positive side. On the positive side, we can say that during the crisis, cities are the testing ground for solutions, for the best solution for sustainable development at economic, social, and environmental level. But also on the negative side, we can say that all the riots, all the protests right now are taking place in cities. I can mention Cairo, I can mention Istanbul, but more recently Baltimore. These are not problems of revolutions or racism, but these are really urban problems. And analyzing why it happens in a city and not in another place, it's something that should be really, really challenging for journalists. So we say that cities are drivers of change, are testing solutions to recovery from crisis, but it's also the place where the new leaderships are emerging. Here in this picture, you can say Matteo Renzi, the Italian prime minister, when he was still a mayor of Florence, with a typical stripe with three colors of the Italian flag. But it's not the only one, with president, with prime minister, and it comes from an urban experience. There are some who were like this, like Ayrault in France was prime minister in the first government ruled by Hollande. We had right now outside the European Union with Edi Rama, who was mayor of Tirana and now is prime minister in Albania. We have Elio Di Rupo, who was prime minister in Belgium and now is mayor of Bonn. So there's a lot of examples. And it's quite interesting to notice that it's in the cities that these new leaderships are emerging, because cities are the places where the national politics is taking examples, is taking force, because maybe it's the only administrative level that is working right now. It's working more, and people really care more about their city than their region or other levels. So it's something that we should notice if we, as journalists, want really to describe the reality. There are many challenges linked to urban journalism. First of all, we need to explain how much cities are relevant for the growth, what they are doing, what are their strategies, what are their plans. But we need to describe also the process of changing our cities and how this changes at urban level on a wide range of topics, from social innovation to the use of public spaces, is affecting the everyday lives of people. To do that, we need a cross-sectoral urban storytelling. There are some problems linked to that. For instance, we don't know if urban journalism is something that should be sectoral or should be general. It should be in the culture sector of a journal, in the economic sector, in the foreign affairs. So it's really hard to understand that. It's really hard also to know how to do urban journalism today, not just focusing on daily news, but mostly on reportage, on analysis. So we need different tools to do that. But it's also a way, I think, to explain what's happening at national and European level through the lens of cities. And it's also a tool that some of you, maybe our correspondents here from Brussels, you can use to explain more clearly what's happening in Europe, starting from the direct effect of the EU decisions on cities. Often, the urban journalist has been focused more on best practices, good experiences. That's great, because it attracts the attention of readers and of our boss in newsrooms. But we need to tell what is behind them, what is behind best practices, why Stockholm is planning its development from here to 2015, why Freiburg or the other brilliant examples, but why Brussels as well is doing a lot on this field, why cities are trying to think in a medium and long term. So we say that there are different tools, there are different options. We said where urban news are in the media, but also the division between sectoral media and mainstream media. It's more useful to have an urban section of a mainstream media or a media dedicated only to urban topics. There are new sources, new types of sources that we need to use if you want to tell more about our cities. Big data. Cities are an incredible source of data, and in some cases are available also for journalists and are a great tool to make new stories and to understand why the system of public transport are working in a different way, or why citizens can be involved in a different way than in the past through social media. So focusing on the relation with people, but also with new types of stakeholders that are clearly a new type of source for urban journalists. Some examples, some best practices I can mention here: City Lab, Guardian City, Cityscope. There are three different medias active at global level with three different stories. City Lab is the evolution of the Atlantic cities, and it's dedicated wholly to urban development, urban topics, and it's ruled by journalists but also by experts. So there are also big names like Richard Florida contributing with City Lab, with articles and essays. Guardian City is another example of a totally different thing, of an urban section of a mainstream media. All the people working for The Guardian, when they have wrote something about cities, their articles are published in that section, but also contributors from the external level. Cityscope is another initiative, as the Guardian Cities is supported by the Rockefeller Foundation, and it's focusing on the urban challenges all around the world through a network of urban journalists, which are based in the different corners of the world. Providing also analysis not only on best practices but also on the governance systems evolution and how they can be linked also to a global level. More than the regular journalism, I think that the urban journalism as a civic role can really foster urban change because it's linked to a specific special context, that is the context of the cities. To do that, we need to analyze cities, so analyze data, figures, policies, strategies, but also to have a different attitude than in the past in describing these urban topics and the urban phenomenon. Everything we see in the news has an urban reflection. Now, the problem in Italy, for instance, is the integration of migrants. The integration of migrants is specifically done at local level, and going in cities, going in small towns to see how they make this integration, how refugees and asylum seekers are part of the communities. It's not something that we need to give as granted. It's something that needs to certain abilities, also certain skills, to go through the news, to go behind the news, and to describe exactly how a global process has a reflection in a very small town. Urban journalism is also a way to promote, I think, a debate at local and national level on the state of our cities. And in some ways, it contributes also to city marketing. Sometimes we see articles on New York Times, on global journals, promoting the Lyon or other cities as the city of the year. It helps to give also to the residents a different perception of the place where they live every day. In some cases, local media are also stakeholders on this matter. I am mentioning the example of a project funded by the Urban program, that is the most important program on sustainable development in cities in Europe. That is called City Logo, and involved 10 European cities active in the promotion of a new urban brand. In some cases, like in the Italian city of Genoa, the local journal, the local television were involved as stakeholders in the local support group. So they gave also suggestions and indications on how to promote the city from the media side, from an internal point of view. So we see that urban journalism is not something all related to journalism, but it's more related also to the communication of cities done by the city halls. In this case, we can say that the local authorities, the city halls, are not the actor that has to do everything, but a facilitator, a mediator between the different parts of the community, and media are definitely part of the local community. So I think that in that context, also the relation with residents, so citizen journalism is a challenge for the journalism itself. But in the case of urban journalists, so the context where citizens are more active in producing news, I think it's really, really, really challenging to explore the possibilities of link between these two aspects. And also the link with the local innovation ecosystems. In some cases, we will see how the people, the start-uppers, the mappers, the innovators at local level can be also co-producers of information, co-producers of news. At European level, at Euro level, here in Brussels, we see that maybe the regional and urban policies are some of the less communicated policies, maybe even less interesting than the fishing policies of other minor topics. Even though the amount of money that is given every year to cities, to regions, is quite high, and people need to know where this money comes from, and without the effects of this at local level. So I think that it's quite challenging for people sitting here in Brussels, journalists sitting here in Brussels, not only communicating the EU action from press releases given by the European Commission, but also explaining to their public the impact of EU policies on cities. Also highlighting the role of city leaders at national level, not only because most of the city leaders will be prime ministers in the future, but also because From some of them are coming very inspiring ideas in small or medium-sized cities that are influencing the European debate on cities and on growth in general. And then it's really important to focus also on the impact of the initiatives and programs on cities taking part to this, also to the analysis of open data. In Italy, we have a very interesting initiative that is called Open Coesione, with all the figures of the cohesion policy in a database that you can use, and you can take these figures. There are also some trainings done by the Italian government on how to use these tools to make open journalism and to make urban journalism. It's something that is giving new tools to analyze the impact of the use of these fonts. And also the description of the urban trends. I think that some of us had the opportunity to report on Greece and on the Greek crisis, but not so many people reported on the effects of this crisis on the city of Athens, for instance, or the city of Thessaloniki. If you go there for a meeting, maybe you are just there, you follow the ministers, and then you go out. But if you walk around the city, you notice that despite the crisis, for instance, Athens is living a new urban development, a new urban regeneration, also driven by citizens themselves. This picture is taken from one of the actions of Athenistas. Athenistas is a group of citizens organizing local workshops and in the city to discover different angles of the city or to promote opera, concerts in the market, for instance, in the evening hours. Or there are some initiatives of temporary use of public spaces or of empty shops, so pop-up shops that are regenerating some areas of the city centers like Aghi Arena or other streets that are now more vibrant than before, when all the shops or 80% of shops were just closed. Another example of urban journalism, in this case mixed also with communication, is what we are doing as a research center of the Italian Association of Municipalities, as national dissemination point of the Urbact program, the program I mentioned before. We are not just translating in Italian the press releases and the newsletters coming from the Secretariat in Paris, but we are trying to make some reportages in the cities which are doing these projects. And we are trying to attract also the attention of local, regional, and national media with new tools, which are interviews to urban stakeholders, not only to the mayors, but also to urban experts, to the people which are really driving the change at local level. And we are doing mixing different tools like social media, so with live tweeting, maps, infographics, videos. So we try to make this urban storytelling as much interactive as possible. At the European level, I think that also at the global level, one of the good examples of urban journalism is Monocle magazine. In general, they have a very tight focus on cities, but in the case of the issue dedicated to the quality of life ranking, they transform themselves in a sort of research institute. So they issue this research on the quality of life in European and global cities, starting from different categories than usual. So focusing on the number of theaters opened, how many bars are opened after midnight, how many international connections from the airport, how many journals. So media considered as a decisive aspect of quality of life in a city. And they realize this ranking, there is a source also for other media. So they transform themselves really in a data gear for others as well. In these three examples that I mentioned, there are some common elements. We said new type of sources. We have different types of stakeholders than in the past. Not only mayors, but also innovators, creative people, urban activists, urban bloggers are sources themselves, urban planners. So we try to involve in the city storytelling also technical stakeholders. And try also to reduce the complexity of what they plan and to explain it to the readers. In some cases, we said some of them can co-produce content with journalists, and so there are some innovative forms of collaboration with data specialists. For instance, in Finland, there's a very incredible initiative. It's the Helsinki Region InfoShare. It's a database with all the set of data of the Helsinki region, and it's a very good source not only for the developers but also for journalists. And in some cases, they cooperated each other. They cooperated together to issue something, some applications, but also some reportage and some things that are really useful to enhance the local democracy. For sure, there is a topic, urban journalism, that makes some open questions, and they would be really good to hear from you also some possible answers, some possible solutions from your point of view on how to make urban journalism more attractive for readers, but also for our boss in the newsrooms, because the problem is often that reporters make proposals, but if these proposals are not accepted, if you're not an insider, but also if you're an insider in the newsroom, it's quite hard to promote this specific angle of view. How to do quality journalism in the urban journalism. I worked also as press officer, and most of the requests is coming from journalists where, can you give me a list of the most strict regulations or frameworks done by the Italian mayors, or just listings? And it's not a very good model of journalism at global level, but specifically on the urban context. The integration between traditional and new media is a topic, it's an issue, also for urban journalists. And as I said before, we are considering cities as a specific special context where this interaction is even stronger and is even more direct than at national level. Habitat 3 is an occasion, it's an opportunity, as we said before, for enhancing this global debate on cities, but also to have a global urban narrative based on the topics that Barras mentioned before, but also to give wider attention on cities, new angles of view on these topics, and new tools for journalists. It's quite hard to understand and to explain how media can directly take part of the process, but our role here with the Urban Journalism Academies is to make emerge the topics that journalists care at global level, and bring them in the major groups, and bring them in the activities that are linked to the Habitat 3 process, also to the construction of a true global network of urban journalists. It's a process started a couple of years ago, but it's still continuing, meeting colleagues, meeting journalists all around the world, and it's also a way to promote your stories, to give a wider audience to the urban stories that you are producing at urban and national level. Also in order to make urban journalists true ambassadors of these topics, not only in their workplace, but in their local context as actors of their urban community. There are already some examples of media focused on the Habitat 3 process. Cityscope is one of them, and it's really helpful to understand what is Habitat 3, what are the different positions involved, or the different stakeholders, or the different major groups. And Cityscope, with this action as a mediator of different issues, is an actor, it's a stakeholder itself in this global debate, not only in the major group dedicated to urban journalism, but more in general in this construction of driving to the new urban agenda. So we see there are different ways to, as media, to take part to this process at global level, taking part to the events like the one we are organizing and we are doing today, and also to the next editions of the Urban Journalism Academies that we are going to do maybe in the rest of Europe and the rest of the world, but also at national and local level, bringing the topics, the 12, 13, 15 different topics of your Habitat 3 in your daily work, as topics that have a direct reflection on what's happening at local level. Also fostering the debate on the efforts of Habitat 3 on your local context, and it can be really good to try to focus on these priorities. We are definitively sure that media as a role, as an incredible media representatives are decisive for that, and can really contribute to make cities a better place now and in the future. And Habitat 3 is giving a framework, is giving an occasion to do that in a more coherent way. I really hope that we can continue our discussion after this event also posting articles, posting stories through the hashtags of the Habitat Tree, but also through urban journalism. So sometimes just try, starting from us and from other colleagues, that we can involve in this debate to cross-post articles and examples of urban journalism, because it's really important also for us in this kind of event to understand which is the state of the art at local level. What are the problems that journalists have in proposing news on cities, and how we can solve all together, sharing practices and sharing different visions on it. Hopefully. I don't know if there's any question, views on it.
From the connection between urbanization and political extremism, because you mentioned that there could be a side effect of that. Are there any studies at the moment that show maybe types of urbanism leading to particular extremisms? What is the organic, let's say, relationship between the two? I mean, we have seen extremism in the world at the moment, in Middle East, but I'm not sure, for example, that they are the products of urbanization specifically. Can you give me some examples maybe of that? And on Simone, so I guess urban journalism is not looking for new audiences. I guess they're targeting the same audiences as, like, let's say, the traditional media. Is that the case? Or is essentially the added value of urban journalism that it offers an additional layer of analysis? Is that essentially what urban journalism is about? So is it new audiences, or is it more a different type of analysis that we have seen so far? Thank you.
Okay, I can start. Maybe in a less broader way, what we can observe definitely, and what I have, like, I had a lot of discussions, for example, with our gender unit on it, is that different types of planning of an area or of housing create certain behavior patterns, or not create, but supports them, definitely. So the way how we create a new area, the way how we create a new housing structure definitely influences the level of crime, of domestic violence, of maybe also political views, but I'm not sure if I would go that far. But of course, the pattern of a city, the planning how our city, and especially like on a neighborhood level and on a housing level, if you think on ways how to arrange houses, how neighbors interact with each other, that definitely influences these points. When we talk about kind of religious extremism in an urban context, of course, we also always refer to the Arab Spring, which has not necessarily only a negative connotation, but we could see clearly in the Arab Spring that it was the massive youth bulge concentrated in a city with all its problems, with mainly the problem of unemployment, of course, with political oppression, but this youth bulge in an urban setting that provided kind of the framework for the uprising. Because you have that massive kind of concentration of young people, you have all the problems for them, and you have the city that gives a framework for that. That means people are close together, people are interacting. If that would happen, that would never happen in the countryside because people are too scattered. They don't communicate, they don't meet in such a way. So of course here the city builds a framework for kind of an uprising. But I'm not sure if I would go that far and say like a certain city pattern supports a certain type of political or religious extremism. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there are different types of public we should address urban journalism. In general, I think that topics of cities, of urban development are more interesting for experts. So the problem is to exit from this very technical communication on this topic and try to bring it at a very comprehensive level for a wider public. So we need to change, I think, the angle of view on it. If we want to do a very good communication on this technical stuff, and okay, experts can help us and we will be great. But if we really want to make people interested in what is happening in cities, I really think that we need to change the way we analyze urban problems, the way we present urban problems. And it's also a way, I think, to make media closer to the reality, closer to the everyday life of people. I can mention you many examples of topics that are not treated by journals, like urban transport, urban sprawl, but the urban sprawl is a wider concept, it's a theoretical concept. But if we tell to the people in a different way, are you satisfied of driving in 2 hours to go to your workplace and 2 hours to go back? Are you happy about it? Let's try to analyze this problem. Let's try to analyze why and how cities can really solve this problem. It's different than just doing a big paper or essay on urban sprawl. There will be something technical, something more on the special level. So I think that the topics are always the same. But what urban journalism should do is to change the way you speak and you write about this topic. That's something that it's not very easy, because I'm sure that the problem is that also many journalists don't have skills to do that, because you need to be at least a bit expert of urbanism, of the different topics, but you can't be expert of everything to write properly on cities. I think that we should just change the angle of view, and changing the angle of view, we can really make it more interesting and sexier for people.
I just had a question about the data angle that you do training with journalists. Do you do anything in terms of advocacy for? Do you do anything in terms of advocacy for the open data movement?
You know, encouraging that governments and cities make more data available to the public.
That was mainly Simona who was talking.
Yeah, that was Simona's because he mentioned it. Sorry.
I didn't understand exactly what you are referring to.
You talked about that you encourage journalists to use data
Yeah.
in their stories, and you do some sort of training or capacity building with them. I was also wondering, from the other side of things, do you somehow interact with urban officials to encourage more open data and transparency? Do you work on the advocacy side as well?
Yes, in fact, from my perspective, I'm journalist, but I also deal every day with local authorities, so I can see the problem from both sides. And I think that yes, we should encourage local authorities to open data and to free a lot of set of data. But it's also very important, I think, to train people at local level to use them, because sometimes you just think that open data are just raw materials for makers, mappers, for technical stuff. But if you really try to make them simple and useful in some ways, data can be dangerous as well. For a city, data can be a really, really dangerous topic. But it's a question of transparency. Chicago did that. Chicago started with Emmanuel Rams to do this process, and now it's one of the most open cities, smart city in the world because of the open data, because of that. And it's really interesting how European cities can try to arrive to this level, not only because journalists ask to the local authorities to open data, but because open data are a right of people, and journalists as part of the communities can use this data. It's normal that the pressure comes also from the press, but sometimes it's just a pressure for political reasons, or it's not a pressure to say, okay, give us the data and we try to do something with it. Because in the newsrooms, the problem is that sometimes, often, more than sometimes, there are no people able to make a very proper use of this data. So you're just interested in know how much the municipality expends for services, blah, blah, but you don't link this data to what's happening to the other data of the neighborhood, how much you spend in which neighborhood, the level of democracy, or also other types of applications. One of the most brilliant applications that is in Europe is OpenVio. It's an application made by the city of Helsinki, which localize every decision of the city council with the GPS. So you can see if the city council adopted a decision for your street. It's a very good tool, and it's something that, as a journalist, I say it's fundamental, because if I want to know more about that neighborhood, if I want to know what happened during the year in that neighborhood, this is one of the sources that I need. But it's not just up to me to ask them. It's up to me as a citizen, not just as a journalist, I think. Open Vio.
VIO.
VAHJO.
Oh, VIO. Thank you.
I would just like to quickly take that question as an opportunity to promote one of the newest UN Habitats tools. Like you talk now about open data on a city level. We have at UN Habitat a branch that is called Global Urban Observatory, and that is basically collecting open data from very different data sources on cities worldwide. And we just 2 months ago launched a new open data portal. If you go to unhabitat.org/urban data, you will get there. And that is all open data. You can download the raw material, but we worked very hard on kind of having tools to visualize all these open data properly into graphics, into different ways. And this is all open source data on cities worldwide with many indicators. You can compare cities. You can basically get all the statistics on cities that you're looking for. So yeah, it's a very useful tool.
Oh, yes. I'm not a real participant here because I'm a colleague of Tobias. I wanted to react on your question, but unless there are other questions from the floor. But just to say, the question you pose is really interesting. This, the linkages between political movement and the way we organize cities. And architects and urbanists, they often think that through architecture, through design, they can define human life. They can make you happy through design. This was very popular in the 60s. It was a real failure. It's still very popular, and it's still also very popular in the media when we see this article about the new eco-green cities. You kind of sell an idea that life will be different through design. So this is a very long discussion between urbanists and sociologists, and we've seen a lot of sociologists arguing that in fact the way we organize things is only only reflects the power play and not the other way around. So it's more important the sociology part of the discussion. Today we can say that we go a little bit. We revisit this agenda, and we realize that organizing cities is not politically neutral. Indeed, it's not. You can do it one way, or you can do it another way, and it will change how people maybe not behave directly, but it will change the opportunities you give to people. It will change the opportunities for people to meet. It will change how they feel, how they can interact, and there is a long history about that. But what you see is that a specific design is not necessarily associated to a specific, will stay through the political transformation. So if you see Paris, the boulevard in Paris, this was a security project. It was meant to bomb people, to counter, to make sure that they would not be uprising in the cities. Today, these boulevards are very popular for people to meet and to gather. It means that the same city organization can actually serve different purposes. So I think it's really a mix, between several elements, but it's a absolutely crucial question in the way we organize cities, the way we organize, or we fail to organize, the growing of the cities, the informal city, the slums, or the formal urban extensions without any public space, any services. Well, we actually create, or we don't create the problems of tomorrow, but we make them more acute. That's for sure.
Are there more questions? Otherwise, we perfectly kept to our time. Thank you very much for coming. If you're interested in more information, we invite you to just drop us your email address, and we would kind of include you in our news bulletins and send you information. So we don't have an email list, but please just write it here on this paper, and I'll take it with me to Nairobi and include you. Yeah? Thanks a lot.